What you're about to see isn't just rare photos. Each shot has a mind-blowing story that few people know about. Take this photo, for example.
A rare moment of downtime for Highland soldiers around 1915, using a blanket toss to blow off steam before heading into the meat grinder of the front lines. Roughhousing like this was a world away from the grim reality of trench warfare waiting just miles off. Back in '35, the iconic sign overlooking Los Angeles actually read Hollywoodland, just like it did when first erected in 1923. It started not as a movie symbol, but as a massive $21,000 illuminated ad for a new housing development, only intended to stand for about a year and a half. The Chamber of Commerce eventually took it over and removed the land part in '49, giving us the sign we know today. Franklin D. Roosevelt navigated America through the Depression and World War II, largely from a wheelchair hidden from public view. Polio had paralyzed him years earlier, but photos almost exclusively showed him standing or leaning, projecting an image of physical strength deemed crucial during national crises. Life in a World War I trench for Scottish Highlanders meant enduring more than just enemy attacks. Constant exposure to mud, cold, and diseases like trench foot was a brutal reality, sometimes made worse by their traditional wool kilts in the wet conditions. Drag racing's flamboyant '70s era featured duos like Jungle Jim Lieberman and Jungle Pam Hardy, seen here with his funny car. Pam was integral to the show and the operation, doing everything from guiding the car after burnouts to packing the crucial parachutes. Lieberman, famous for pushing limits with wild burnouts and high appearance rates, relied on Pam's trackside work to keep their high-energy act running across countless events each year. Talk about nerve. That's cowboy performer Monty Montana asking President Eisenhower if he can rope him during Ike's own inaugural parade in '53. Eisenhower actually played along, stood up in the reviewing stand, and Montana managed to loop the rope around his shoulders from 15 feet out. This chaotic scene is straight out of the British comedy Carry On Again Doctor from 1969, with regulars like Barbara Windsor and Charles Hawtrey. The Carry On movies were famous back then for slapstick humor and tons of cheeky innuendo, kind of like a seaside postcard come to life. Here you've got Hollywood royalty in 1963, Peter, Henry, and Jane Fonda. Henry was the established legend, while Jane was hitting her stride on Broadway, and Peter was just starting his own path towards counterculture films. Captures a moment before Jane's activism took center stage, and Peter hit big with Easy Rider, showing three distinct personalities within one famous and famously complicated family. Somewhere on the long, brutal march towards Berlin in 1945, Soviet troops got a moment's break watching this acrobatic performance staged right on their tanks. Imagine the contrast: battle-hardened soldiers surrounded by the machinery of war, finding a brief, surreal distraction from the grim reality they faced daily. These kinds of frontline entertainments were vital for morale during the final push of World War II. Ford, Fisher, and Hamill goofing around during the Empire Strikes Back era, likely 1980 when the movie hit big. Empire really cemented Star Wars mania, and this shot catches the off-screen dynamic of the trio who carried that galaxy far, far away. You see the mix of Hamill's playful energy, Fisher's wit, and Ford's cool that fans loved both on and off the screen. This formal dinner shows French WI veterans known as les gueules cassées, the broken faces. Trench warfare often resulted in horrific facial injuries, and these men formed their own support association in 1921, starkly naming themselves after their shared experience. Gatherings like this provided community for those dealing with visible wounds often misunderstood by society. That's Einstein strolling at Princeton in '54 with Hideki Yukawa, Japan's first Nobel physicist John Wheeler, who'd named the black hole, and Homi Bhabha, father of India's nuclear program. Four giants of physics from different fields caught walking together at the Institute for Advanced Study. Here's Samuel L. Jackson marrying actress LaTanya Richardson back in August 1980. This was long before his major movie stardom. Jackson was focused on stage acting and landing small film parts after moving to New York in the mid-'70s. It would be over a decade until Jungle Fever and Pulp Fiction made him a household name. This striking photo captures a woman balancing a sewing machine on her head in Kuwait around 1955. Oil wealth was beginning to transform the country rapidly during this period. Yet traditional methods of carrying goods persisted alongside the modern buildings appearing in the background, showing a society in transition. Check out this ultimate 1950s furniture piece from around '51, a combination TV, radio, and cocktail cabinet. Home bars were booming status symbols back then, part of that whole post-war suburban cocktail culture. Having your booze and your your screen all in one spot like this was peak convenience, 50s style. This photo shows students, likely in Kabul during the 60s or 70s, a period sometimes pointed to as broadly progressive for Afghanistan. However, the modernization and opportunities seen in parts of the capital weren't necessarily the norm across the entire country. John Lennon and Yoko Ono launched their War is Over If You Want It campaign with billboards in major cities for Christmas 1969, including this one in Times Square. It was a direct message aimed at fostering collective will to end the Vietnam War. Using prominent advertising space for an anti-war statement was a significant, unconventional move for the time. Roller skating culture hit a peak in places like Venice Beach around 1979 to 1980, defined by this kind of look skates, distinctive shorts, and tube socks. It became a huge part of the local scene, blending outdoor activity with the era's disco influence. The style captured here is very specific to that Southern California moment. Color shots of Afghanistan from '61 aren't easy to find, so this market scene is pretty interesting. Looks like a regular, busy market day, the kind of thing that was normal before decades of conflict changed everything. Just look at all that fruit piled high in the stalls. This portrait captures Cybill Shepherd around 1972, a key moment right after her breakout role in 1971's The Last Picture Show. That film launched her career almost instantly, leading directly to another major part in The Heartbreak Kid, released the same year this photo was likely taken. She quickly became one of the most talked about new actresses in Hollywood. Looking at Paris's Rue de Rivoli, 1900 versus 2016, the structure looks remarkably similar. Much of central Paris got this uniform style during Baron Haussmann's massive rebuilding project in the mid-1800s. Strong preservation rules later helped maintain this look, unlike many other European cities that saw more destruction or modern redevelopment. That's Michelle Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas fame with Dennis Hopper, captured during their infamously short marriage in 1970. It lasted just 8 days. Hopper was riding high off Easy Rider, but known for his intensity, while Phillips was navigating life after her band's breakup. They tied the knot on October 31st, and Hopper filed for divorce on November 8th. These fellas picking hops in Kent, England, back in 1928 used stilts simply because they had to. Hop vines shoot up incredibly tall, sometimes 20 feet or more, so workers needed the extra height to reach the valuable cones near the top. This method was common practice in hop-growing areas like Kent for ages, before machines started doing most of the work. Meet Ruth Carroll Taylor, hired by Mohawk Airlines in late 1957 and recognized as the first African-American flight attendant in the U.S. Originally a registered nurse, she broke a significant color barrier in the industry, but her job lasted only months due to the airline's then-common marriage ban. Taylor later became an activist and author, writing a book aimed at helping black men navigate American society. On the huge set of 1959's Ben-Hur, filmed at Rome's Cinecittà Studios, even Roman centurions took breaks. Here, some actors in costume gather around a Vespa scooter between takes. Making the movie was a massive undertaking, involving thousands of extras and elaborate ancient world sets. Jane Mansfield was already a major blonde bombshell by 1957, known for playing up her rivalry with Marilyn Monroe and her glamorous image. Here she's posing with that year's Miss Hollywood, whose name seems lost to time but whose expression says quite a lot. Mansfield was a master at grabbing publicity, often setting up photo ops like this to keep her name in the papers during her peak years. Raquel Welch hit superstardom a couple years before this 68 shot, thanks mainly to 1 Million Years BC, even with just a few lines. By 68, she was a global sensation, though still fighting to be taken seriously as an actress beyond her looks. This photo likely captures her between films like Bandolero or Lady in Cement, cementing that powerful image the public couldn't get enough of. Riding the New York subway back in '63 looked a bit different. Check out the sea of hats and newspapers. Before smartphones, grabbing the morning or evening paper was the routine for commuters catching up on news. The suits, the hats, the serious reading, it captures that specific mid-century vibe of city life and the daily grind. Queen Elizabeth II faced this massive crowd, estimated over 250,000 people, at Delhi's Ramlila grounds during her first royal tour of India in 1961. This was a huge diplomatic event, happening just 14 years after India's independence from Britain. Addressing such a vast gathering symbolized a new post-colonial relationship being navigated between the two countries. This wreckage on the beach isn't D-Day, it's the grim aftermath of the disastrous Dieppe raid in France, August 1942. Mostly Canadian troops, along with British and some American forces, assaulted the German-occupied port but were met with brutal defenses. What you see here, wrecked landing craft, a destroyed tank, and a downed Allied plane, likely a Mustang or Spitfire, reflects the heavy losses and chaos of that failed operation. That guy grinning hiding while holding the heart of the Nagasaki bomb is Manhattan Project scientist Harold Agnew. Taken likely on Tinian Island around August 1945, he's holding the plutonium core of the Fat Man weapon just before its assembly and loading. Agnew was actually one of the scientific observers on the plane that dropped the bomb on Hiroshima days earlier. These attendants worked aboard Hugh Hefner's famous private DC-9, the Big Bunny, known for its extreme luxury back in the 70s. That custom jet featured a full bar, showers, movie projectors, and even a disco area for entertaining guests during flights. Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford are cracking up here with Peter Mayhew, Chewbacca himself, likely celebrating Star Wars mania reaching peak levels around 1978. Looks like they're at Eric Idle's place, possibly marking the movie's soundtrack hitting gold or platinum status. Mayhew's holding what looks like a record award, just a casual moment capturing the main guys right when that sci-fi phenomenon was taking over the world. The universal recycling symbol wasn't created by some big design firm. It was designed by 23-year-old college student Gary Anderson back in 1970. He submitted it for a contest sponsored by the Container Corporation of America, aiming to raise environmental awareness for the first Earth Day. Anderson won the contest, netting maybe $2,000 to $2,500, and the logo entered the public domain, becoming one of the most recognized symbols globally. That's a young Carrie Fisher watching her mother, Hollywood star Debbie Reynolds, perform on stage at the Riviera Hotel in Las Vegas back in '63. Fisher basically grew up backstage and on film sets, getting an early first-hand look at the world of show business. Seeing her famous mom command the Vegas stage from the wings must have been quite the introduction to the industry she'd later join herself. Robert F. Kennedy grabs a bite at a drive-in in Bluefield, West Virginia, likely during the crucial 1960 primary campaign supporting his brother JFK. West Virginia was a key state, and making stops like this was about connecting with working-class voters in Appalachia, trying to bridge the gap between his Boston background and the local concerns. It was retail politics, Kennedy style, trying to win hearts and minds one drive-in at a time. Sally Field in 1977, the year Smokey and the Bandit became a massive box office smash, making her and Burt Reynolds one of Hollywood's hottest pairings. This was a turning point for Field, who was actively moving away from her earlier TV roles like Gidget and The Flying Nun. She was proving she could handle bigger movies, paving the way for her dramatic Oscar-winning roles just around the corner. Warsaw in '46 was still mostly ruins after the war, but check out this street photographer trying to make a living. He's using his own painted backdrop of a peaceful landscape to block out the devastation behind his customer. A real slice of life showing people trying to find some normalcy, and maybe a bit of dignity even when surrounded by wreckage. This woman photographed in Iran during the 1960s shows a style common in cities like Tehran before the 1979 revolution. Western fashions and less conservative dress codes were visible in certain urban areas during that era under the Shah. Photos like this capture that specific period, which contrasts sharply with the stricter rules that came later. Think your internet wiring is messy? Take a look at Stockholm's main telephone tower around 1890. Thousands of individual lines connecting subscribers created this insane web overhead before engineers figured out better ways to bundle cables underground.